Welcome to Grace of God. Today we are going to dive into one of the most inspiring stories in the Bible, David versus Goliath. We will see how a young boy, a shepherd by trade, managed to defeat one of the most threatening and fearsome giants in the history of the Bible. We will see how everything becomes possible when, like David, we choose to surrender all our problems into God's hands and trust Him completely to fight our battles. Let's begin. The story of David and Goliath is one of the most famous in the Bible, symbolizing the triumph of the weak over the strong through faith and courage. This story, found in the first book of Samuel, shows us how a young shepherd, with absolute trust in God, dared to challenge and defeat a formidable giant. Based on biblical elements, we will tell you the complete story of David from beginning to end. But before that, if you haven't done so yet, consider subscribing to our channel, Grace of God, so you don't miss any of our future videos. Also, remember to like this video and leave your prayer requests in the comments so that we can continue to pray for you. Let's now dive into this fascinating story of David versus Goliath. David, a central figure in the Bible, is often celebrated for his achievements as a king and warrior. But his childhood also provides crucial insights into his character and future destiny. David was born in Bethlehem, a small town located in the region of Judea. The Bible does not specify the exact year of his birth, but it is estimated to be around 1040 BC, during the period of the judges in Israel. He was the youngest son of Jesse, an Ephrathite of Bethlehem, and his wife, whose name is not mentioned in the Bible. Jesse was a respected man and a descendant of Ruth and Boaz, iconic figures in the Messianic lineage. As suggested in 1 Chronicles 2:16, David had 7 brothers and probably 2 sisters, although their names are not all explicitly mentioned. Despite being the youngest of his brothers, David already showed signs of his exceptional character from a young age. He spent his days tending his father's flocks, a seemingly humble task that played a crucial role in his development. As a shepherd, David learned to be vigilant, courageous, and protective, qualities that would prove essential in his future role as king and warrior. In addition to his practical skills, David was also a talented musician. He played the harp and composed psalms, often singing to God while watching over his sheep. This combination of physical strength and spiritual sensitivity made him an extraordinary young man. His unwavering faith in God was evident even at a young age, and this did not go unnoticed. The turning point in David's life came when the prophet Samuel, acting under God's orders, went to Bethlehem to anoint the future king of Israel. Although Saul was still the reigning king, God had rejected Saul because of his disobedience and was seeking a new leader for his people. Samuel arrived at Jesse's house and asked to see his sons. David's older brothers passed before Samuel, but God chose none of them. Finally, Samuel asked if there was another son, and Jesse sent for David from the fields. As soon as David arrived, God said to Samuel, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." Thus Samuel anointed David, and the Spirit of God came powerfully upon him. David was described as a handsome young man with a fine appearance. But more than his physical appearance, it was his heart and unwavering faith in God that set him apart. He was courageous, as evidenced by his battles against predators to protect his flock. His spiritual devotion was not only expressed through his music, but also through his prayers and psalms, which are still sung and prayed today. David's family relationships were complex. His brothers sometimes seemed to despise him, as shown by their reaction when he arrived on the battlefield to bring provisions and heard Goliath's provocations. Eliab, the eldest, accused him of arrogance and misplaced curiosity. Nevertheless, despite the tensions, David respected his brothers and father, obeying his father's orders even in humble tasks. Meanwhile, the Philistines, traditional enemies of the Israelites, were preparing an attack. They camped on one hill while the Israelite army camped on another with a valley between them. Each day, a Philistine champion named Goliath would descend into the valley to challenge the Israelites. Goliath was a giant, standing about 3 meters tall. His armor was heavy and imposing, and he carried a massive spear. Goliath mocked the Israelites, challenging them to send a man to fight him in a duel. He proclaimed that if the Israelite killed him, the Philistines would become their servants. But if Goliath won, the Israelites would be subject to the Philistines. The sight of this terrifying giant and his daily provocations filled the Israelite army with fear and discouragement. Goliath is described in 1 Samuel 17 as a Philistine giant from Gath, one of the 5 major cities of the Philistines. The Philistines were a seafaring people, recurrent enemies of the Israelites, living in the coastal region of Canaan. Goliath is best known for his impressive size and terrifying appearance. In 1 Samuel 17:4, the Bible specifies that he was 6 cubits and a span tall, which corresponds to about 3 meters, although some translations and interpretations suggest slightly different measurements. What set Goliath apart from the other Philistines was that he was truly impressive and terrifying. The description of his equipment is detailed in the Bible, emphasizing not only his size, but also his impressive and sophisticated gear for the time. For information, it is important to note that he wore a bronze helmet, a precious and robust material. His coat of mail weighed 5,000 shekels of bronze, approximately 57 kilograms. This armor offered significant protection against cutting and piercing weapons. Additionally, he wore greaves to protect his legs. His spear was as impressive as the giant himself. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the iron point of the spear weighed 600 shekels, approximately 7 kilograms. Finally, besides his armor, Goliath had a shield bearer who walked before him, which shows the importance of his defense and the extent of his preparation for battle. Goliath also stood out for his verbal provocations and bold challenges. For 40 days, morning and evening, he stood before the Israelite army and issued a challenge for single combat. His words were full of scorn and arrogance, insulting not only the army of Israel, but also their God. This intimidating attitude sowed fear and discouragement among the Israelite soldiers, including King Saul, who hesitated to take up the challenge. It was in this tense context that David, still a young shepherd, was sent by his father to bring provisions to his brothers who served in Saul's army. Upon arriving at the camp, David heard Goliath's provocations and saw the fear he inspired in the Israelite army. Outraged by the giant's audacity to defy the army of the living God, David began to ask questions about the reward promised to the one who would defeat Goliath. David's brothers were irritated by his behavior, thinking he was merely curious and reckless. But David was not discouraged. Saul, the king of Israel, heard of David's determination and summoned him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul, doubting the abilities of a young shepherd against an experienced warrior, tried to dissuade David, but he responded with conviction. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." Convinced by David's faith and courage, Saul gave him his blessing. He offered David his own armor, but it was too heavy and cumbersome for the young shepherd. David chose to go without it, relying on his sling and his faith in God. He took 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his shepherd's bag, and approached Goliath. When he saw David, Goliath despised him. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" he mocked. Goliath cursed David by his gods and added, "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David boldly replied, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." The battle was brief but decisive. David ran toward Goliath, put a stone in his sling, and hurled it with precision. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead, sinking into his skull. The giant fell face down on the ground. David ran, stood over him, took Goliath's sword, and cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw their champion dead, they fled, and the Israelites pursued them, winning a great victory that day. This victory marked a turning point for David. He immediately became a national hero. His reputation as a brave warrior and a faithful leader to God quickly spread, although he was not yet king. This victory over Goliath was a foreshadowing of his future role as the monarch of Israel. The story of David and Goliath is rich in spiritual and moral lessons. It shows how faith in God can give courage in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. David was not just a young shepherd, he was an instrument of God, used to show that true strength comes from faith and trust in the Lord. David's victory over Goliath is often interpreted as a metaphor for the ability of the weak to triumph over the strong when supported by sincere faith and a just cause. David, who later became king of Israel, continued to demonstrate these qualities of faith and leadership. His reign was marked by many battles, personal challenges, and successes. He is also known for writing many psalms, expressing feelings of joy, pain, repentance, and praise to God. David's life, with its ups and downs, is a powerful testimony to the intimate relationship he had with God. For believers, the story of David and Goliath is more than just a lesson in courage. It is a demonstration of God's power to work through ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. David did not defeat Goliath by his own strength, but by the power of God working through him. It reminds us that no matter the size of our challenges or the greatness of our enemies, with faith in God, we can overcome all obstacles. In conclusion, the story of David and Goliath is a timeless lesson of faith, courage, and trust in God. It shows that God often uses the most humble and unlikely of his servants to accomplish his purposes. For David, this was the beginning of a life dedicated to serving God and his people, showing that with God, all things are possible. May this story continue to inspire and strengthen the faith of all who hear it. And as you understand that with God, all things are possible, may this story help you conquer all your Goliaths. Whether you have health problems, financial worries, or any other issues, know that with Jesus Christ of Nazareth, your victory is assured. May God bless you abundantly. See you soon for another exciting Bible story.